Welcome to Travels of a Paladin. This is episode 5, in which I will be talking about my most embarrassing day ever and a little bit about my 9/11 experiences. Since they all happened about the same time, I'm going to kind of cover two at the same time. Yes, I know it's past 9/11, but Veterans Day is today. So sit back and enjoy my most embarrassing day ever. So as you can see, I've changed up the video format just a little bit. I'm working with some new video editing software. This particular version is it's called Clipchamp, which is a freeware video editing software compatible with Microsoft Windows 10. And so this is going to be a little bit different. Rather than you guys staring at my face, I decided to spend some time just recording the audio and talking through my experiences. But it also allows me to add pictures and sound and text and all kinds of crazy stuff. So if you like what you see, let me know down in the comments. If you think there's something that's missing, then by all means let me know. So if you're born anytime after September 2001, you can probably remember exactly where you were when the planes hit the World Trade Center towers in New York City, and also the Pentagon, and the plane that touched down in, I believe it was Pennsylvania. But of course, I remember exactly where I was at. I was stationed in Turkey. I had just arrived around September the 7th or 8th, and I was still getting kind of used to my job and what I was supposed to be doing in support of Operation Northern Watch in Adana, Turkey. And as I remember, it was it was towards the evening, as I remember, as I was working swing shifts, and and we had, of course, hot and cold running Fox News and CNN on the TV, and they were all standing around watching the closed circuit television in the room, the secure room where we were at, and of course it was this was the plane had just hit the first tower, and then, like I said, working with Intel types is like crazy smart people. So, they're all kind of reminiscing about, well, didn't some Cessna plane hit the tower several years ago? Yeah, but it didn't do a whole lot of damage. And, well, then there was that one time that a truck had driven up underneath into the parking garage and exploded, and lots of smoke and fire, but not a whole lot of damage and whatnot. And it was just about that time that the second plane hit the second tower. Well, like I said, these are all crazy intelligent people. So, as soon as the second plane hit the second tower, every antenna in everybody's radar went straight up, and it was like there was this common gasp of everybody saying that was no accident. So as we're all kind of scrambling, and like I said, the officers all kind of huddled together for, they just assumed that we were going to be on a war footing any minute now. Of course, that took about a month for them to get complete orders and whatnot, but everybody could sense that there was something unique that was going on. So I broke away from the skiff, which is a secure controlled intel facility, and I might not have the acronym right. I mean, holy smoke, it's been 20 plus years. So anyway, so I left the skiff and I went into one of the back rooms. We had a room that was situated in the back that had unclassified telephones. And I got on the telephone and I called Cami, who was still back in Alaska. And I told her, I said, hey, listen, I don't know what's going on. If you're watching the news, this is what's happening. And um, if you see what's going on, just be aware that I'm probably not going to be in communications with you for, days, if not weeks or months. Just know that I'm safe. I'm in a hardened shelter. There's absolutely nothing but we're about to go into lockdown. I got a bad feeling about this. So, So that gave her, I believe, a measure of comfort. But from what I understand, she also talked to her dad, and her dad was also, I'll let her tell you her story, but it sounded like he'd gone into panic mode already and whatnot. So, well, anyways, to kind of finish up that part of the story, um, like I said, it took about a month for us to get our orders, what we were going to do, and we weren't sure whether or not, we were going to be support of the Desert Storm missions or Desert Storm 2 or whatever. Um, but it turned out that we wound up supporting the initial humanitarian missions that were flying from eastern Turkey over to Afghanistan. There's a lot that goes into that. Some of it's classified, but just to let you know that I finished out the rest of my tour. Basically, like I said, just supporting humanitarian missions as well as Operation Northern Watch, and that was through September, October, November, and into December of 2001. So now to the second half of the story, which is my most embarrassing day ever. And like I said, it follows closely on the heels of 9/11, so that's why I kind of slashed the two of them together. But so from September 11th, September, October, November the 11th. November the 11th is known as Veterans Day in the United States, but it's also known as Armistice Day in Europe. November the 11th is, as I remember, the anniversary of the signing of the Armistice Treaty that ended World War I. So it's a pretty big day in Europe. A couple of weeks prior to November the 11th, like I said, remember this is 2001, and one of the adjutants, who is a female, as I believe, came up to me. By this point, I was, like I said, I had landed in September, October, November. I'm playing keyboards for the chapel services for the contemporary Christian service on Sunday mornings. I had been doing it for several weeks. A couple of weeks prior to November the 11th, one of the gals from the British contingent approaches me and she says, "Hey, I see you play keyboards. Could you help us out?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." She says, "Well, we need somebody to play keyboards for us for the Remembrance Day service on November the 11th. Would you be available?" I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "That's not a problem." I said, "What you need to do though is you need to make sure that I get the music in advance so that I can, take a few minutes to practice it and, kind of know what I'm doing." She's like, "It shouldn't be any problem for you. They're all old standard hymns. Everything's fine. You should be able to handle it." And I'm like, "Sure." I said, "Just, like I said, give me the music ahead of time and we'll rock and roll." A few days goes by. She calls me at my office in the skiff, and she says, "Hey, just to let you know that we found somebody in the British contingent who actually plays piano, and she knows the hymns, so you're off the hook. You don't have to worry about it." So you just have to know. I mean, I don't technically play the piano. What I do is I play by ear. Well, of course, I use my fingers too, but I play by ear. And what I do is I use a lot of cheat notes, cheat keys kind of thing. And if you ever look at some sheet music, like especially guitar tabs and that sort of thing, it'll give you the chord progressions for the song. And then, like I said, you can, over time, you just learn how to use filler notes and that sort of thing so everybody knows what the tune is supposed to be. So, anyway, so that's how I play the piano. She calls me up and says, "Don't worry about it. We got somebody to cover for you." I'm like, "Great." So a couple of weeks goes by, November the 11th rolls around, and I get finished playing. The contemporary Christian service usually goes from like 10 to 11 kind of thing. 11 o'clock is done, and I start packing my kit bag up, throw all my music books together. I have to be at work for like 2 or something like that. So I start walking out, and this British adjutant runs up to me. She's like, "Where are you going?" And I'm like, "Well, I just got done with the contemporary service, so I'm leaving. I'm going to go get some lunch and go to work a little later." And she's like, "Well, they were supposed to call you and tell you that other piano player backed out. You're all we have." And I'm like, well," I said, "I can wait and we can do it." And, but I said, "But I've never seen the music. You were supposed to get me the music just so I had some time to rehearse it and whatnot." And she's like, "Well, let's," so she drags me back to the piano and puts the music on the piano, and I'm looking at it, and it is just horrible. Okay, so this is a pretty good representation of what she put down in front of me. First couple things to notice is there are no chords indicated whatsoever on the first half of the first top of the page, and the lyrics are on the second half of the page, which means I have no clue what the melody is supposed to sound like. I mean, yeah, I can read the individual notes across the top, but there's no chords. There's no way I'm going to be able to play this. And the other thing is, if you look at the notes across the top, is that this is a very overly simplified version of what it was originally supposed to sound like, and it's only the first verse or up to the chorus. Picture this as a symphonic renderance, like with all of the, the woodwinds and the clarinets and all that kind of stuff crammed into about the first half of the page, and you got a pretty good idea of what it looked like when she put it down in front of me. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a beautiful hymn, and ever since I learned it, it's actually one of my favorite hymns of all time. Still gives me chills. But the composer, his name was Gustav Holst, and he was the same guy that wrote the Planets. I don't know if you're familiar at all with classical music, but Gustav Holst wrote a symphony called the Planets, and each one of the movements is built around each one of the planets: Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, et cetera, et cetera. You've probably heard Holst's Mars, because it's been used um, as a framework for a lot of other music. Like if you've ever heard Star Wars or Star Trek or Inception or any one of those other spacey type movies or TV shows, they all took their inspiration from Holt's The Planet, particularly Mars. So so she puts this orchestral work in front of me, and I start chicken scratching out all the chords, no guidance whatsoever, never heard it before. Well, I'm thinking it's either in C or maybe it's in A minor. It's kind of hard to tell from just the sheet music. Hey, I'm not that good. And as I'm doing the chords, that's when the dignitaries start to show up. First, it's the Turkish base commander, his wife, and all his entourage, all dressed to the nines. They file in and they take up the first two rows on the right hand side of the chapel. Then in comes the British base commander and his wife and his full entourage, all the majors, captains, and so forth. And it's almost like this competition to see who's wearing the most medals, kind of thing. And then, just when you thought it was bad enough, then in comes all the American base commander, who's kind of my boss's boss, and his wife, and captains and majors, and they all fill in the rest of the right hand side. Now, when he starts to walk in, I've only got about the first full line kind of done, kind of, sort of, and I'm really starting to sweat. Well, 11 o'clock rolls around. 11 o'clock on 11/11 was when they signed the armistice, so that's when the service started. A rather dignified Anglican bishop, archbishop, something came up to the podium, and me still feverishly scribbling in the background on the sheet music. And of course, no prayer first. That would have bought me another 5 minutes. And he starts with, "Please stand for the opening hymn." And he looks at me. Well, I never made it to the end of the sheet music, so I couldn't even fake an introduction. I just launched into what I had. Well, at some point, the Archbishop realized that I was lost as a goose, and he starts bellowing out the melody. He gave me somewhat of an anchor, a lifeboat, life vest, he sort of threw me, and then I just filled in what chords that I had after figuring out it was supposed to be an A minor, and then supplemented with the melody line to somewhat keep us all together. I've never been so embarrassed in my whole life. Getting thrown to the wolves that way, no idea what the music was, room full of dignitaries, and once the service was over, I basically just picked up my kit bag and ran out the door. Now you would think that after my abysmal performance, something would have trickled down to my boss, some sort of reprimand or something. But either they didn't know enough about who I was, or I left too quickly enough, but in any case, nothing was ever said again. No awards, but no dishonorable discharge either, so I called it a wash. But today is a day that will forever live in infamy, at least for me. Even 21 years later, I still get the chills thinking about it. Now, I'll play the tune for you, and it's going to sound a lot simpler than it was when I played it, for certainly. But enjoy.